Grace, where is my daughter? Ada, please, let me explain. I have been standing outside this house for 10 minutes. I could not move my legs. Do you know why? Because that child sitting at that table doing her homework has my mother's nose, my grandmother's hands, and I knew before you even opened your mouth. I loved her. I swear to God, I loved her like she was mine. She is mine. She was always mine. And you knew that. Every single day for 11 years. You knew.
The morning Ada Okonkwo boarded her flight back to Lagos, she made herself one promise. She was going to find her daughter. 11 years had passed. 11 years of building a life in Toronto, of working double shifts in the early days, of crying in bathroom stalls during lunch breaks, of sending money back home and pretending she was fine. 11 years of carrying the weight of a decision she made at 26 years old, alone, terrified, and completely dependent on the only person she trusted in the world. Grace. Ada had told herself the story so many times. It had worn smooth like river stone. She had gotten pregnant by a man who belonged to another woman. She was ashamed, desperate, and young. Grace had taken her in without a single question, sheltered her through 9 months of hiding, held her hand when the pain became unbearable, and wept with her the morning the baby arrived. A girl, small and perfect and heartbreakingly beautiful. Ada had looked at that baby for 2 hours. Then she had told Grace she could not keep her, that she needed the child placed with a good family, far enough away that Ada wouldn't spend every day breaking apart. And Grace had nodded. Grace had said she understood. Grace had said she would handle everything. And Ada had believed her. Because that was what Grace was. She was the one who handled things. She was the one who showed up. She was the one who had been Ada's person since their second year at the University of Lagos. Since the afternoon Ada had failed her statistics exam and Grace had sat on the floor of the hostel corridor with her for 3 hours until Ada stopped crying. Ada had gone back to Toronto carrying grief and gratitude in equal measure. She had never once suspected. It was a photograph that broke everything open. One of Ada's cousins had posted pictures from a Lagos school prison giving on social media. A general post, nothing significant, just the kind of family update that cluttered timelines. Ada had been scrolling absently on a Tuesday night after a long shift when her thumb stopped moving. There was a girl in the photograph. She was standing at the edge of the frame holding a certificate, wearing a school uniform. She was not tagged. Her face was half turned toward the camera, but something about the angle of her jaw, the particular way her left hand held the paper, Ada had felt it before she understood. A pulling sensation deep in her chest, the kind that lives below thought. She had zoomed in until the image pixelated. She had stared at that girl's face for 40 minutes. Then she had called her cousin. The cousin had said the picture was taken at a school in Lekki, that the girl belonged to a family friend, that her name was... Ada had not heard the name. She had already started searching for flights. Grace Adeyemi had built a beautiful life. That was the truth, and it was also the wound, because every brick of that life had been laid on a foundation she had poured in secret, in the dark, while her best friend was thousands of miles away, not knowing. She lived in a 4-bedroom house in Lekki Phase 1 with her husband, Kenneth, a quiet and decent man who worked in logistics and asked very few questions. They had married 6 years ago. Kenneth knew Grace had adopted a daughter. Before they met, she had shown him papers, real enough papers obtained through connections she never fully explained, and Kenneth had accepted Adazi as his own, with a gentleness that sometimes made Grace feel the horror of what she had done. Adazi. Grace had named her after Ada. She had told herself it was tribute. On her worst nights, she understood it was guilt wearing the costume of love. Adazi was 11 years old and she was extraordinary. She was sharp and funny, and she read books the way other children watch television, consuming them in long, hungry stretches. She had her mother's height, the early promise of it in the length of her limbs. She had Ada's habit of tilting her head slightly when she was thinking. She had a laugh that arrived suddenly and filled every room it entered. Grace loved her. That part was never in question. The love was real and it was total, and it was the most honest thing in Grace's life. And it was also the thing that had allowed her to keep lying year after year, because she could not imagine a version of the world where Adazi was not hers. She had convinced herself that Ada had moved on, that Ada had built a new life and sealed that chapter, that no one was suffering because of what she had done. She had been wrong about all of it. Ada arrived on a Thursday. She did not call ahead. She could not have formed the words. She took a taxi from the airport directly to the address her cousin had found, because once Ada Okoronko decided something, the decision moved through her like current, quiet, invisible, and impossible to stop. She sat outside the gate for 10 minutes. Not from doubt, from the specific kind of paralysis that arrives when your body understands that the next step will divide your life permanently into before and after. Then the gate opened from the inside, and the young girl walked out in a school uniform, backpack over one shoulder, already pulling a book from the front pocket. And Ada saw her face. Full, clear, undeniable. She saw her own mother's nose sitting on that child's face as naturally as if it had always belonged there. She saw her grandmother's hands, the particular shape of the fingers, the way the knuckles sat, wrapped around the spine of a novel. She saw 11 years of her own absence written in a child who was walking and laughing and completely alive, and never once knew her real mother was standing 15 feet away with tears running silently down both cheeks. The girl went back inside. Ada sat for another moment. Then she walked to the front door and knocked. Grace opened the door, and her face did something that Ada would never forget. It did not show surprise. It showed recognition, immediate, total, and terrified. The face of someone who has spent years waiting for a knock they always knew was coming. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ada said, very quietly, "Where is my daughter?" What followed was not a fight. It was something worse than a fight. It was a reckoning conducted in low voices in a bright sitting room while a child did homework 30 feet away, and every word landed like something irreversible. Grace spoke first. She said she had panicked. She said that when Ada handed the baby over and left for the airport, something had happened inside her that she could not explain. A recognition, a claiming, a decision made in the body before the mind could intervene. She said she had told herself it was temporary. Then she said she had told herself Ada would be better off not knowing. Then she had stopped telling herself anything and simply lived inside the lie until she forgot where the lie ended and her life began. Ada listened to all of it without moving. Then she said, "You were my person when I had nothing and no one." Grace said, "I know." Ada said, "You looked me in the face for 11 years. Every phone call, every Christmas message, every time I cried to you about how much I missed her and wondered if she was okay. You looked me in the face." Grace said nothing. Ada said, "You let me grieve her. You let me grieve my own living child." The room went very quiet. From the hallway came the small sound of a pencil moving across paper. Kenneth came home to find his wife sitting on the floor of the sitting room and a woman he had never met sitting across her in the armchair. He understood within 4 minutes. Grace did not spare him the details. She sat on that floor and she told him everything. Her voice flat and emptied out, the way voices go when there is nothing left to protect. Kenneth was a quiet man. He did not shout. He did not throw things. He stood in the middle of his living room and looked at his wife for a long time. And what Grace saw in his face was not anger. It was the particular expression of a man recalculating everything he thought he knew. Every memory, every conversation, every moment of tenderness, running it all through a new and terrible filter. He said, "Adaze." Grace said yes. He said, "She is not adopted." Grace said no. He looked at Ada. He said, "She is yours." Ada said, "She is mine." Kenneth nodded slowly. Then he picked up his car keys from the table where he had just set them down, walked back to the front door, and left. He did not slam it. The quiet click of it closing was worse than any sound he could have made. Grace sat on the floor. Telling Adaze was the moment that broke Grace completely. Ada had asked for one night. She stayed in a hotel in Victoria Island and she gave Grace one night to be with her daughter before everything changed. Grace spent that night sitting at the edge of Adaze's bed, watching her sleep, memorizing the particular way her eyelids lay against her cheeks, the small sounds she made, the way her hand curled under her chin. She did not sleep. In the morning, Ada came back and they sat together, the three of them, at the dining table where Adaze had been doing homework the afternoon before, and Grace told her daughter the truth. Adaze listened the way she listened to everything, very still, very focused, her head tilted slightly to the left. When Grace finished, Adaze looked at Ada for a long time. Then she looked back at Grace and said, "Did you love me?" Grace said, "Every day. Every single day." Adaze nodded slowly. She looked at the table. She looked at her own hands. Then she began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, the way rain falls when it means to stay. And Grace reached for her and held her. And Adaze let herself be held. And Grace understood that this was the last time. That this particular shape of the world, this child in her arms, this smell of her hair, this weight of her, was ending. Ada watched from across the table with tears running quietly down her face. She did not rush it. She let Grace have that last moment in full, because Ada Okonkwo had not come back to be cruel. She had come for her daughter, and she was going to take her daughter, but she was not going to take the goodbye. Grace lost everything in the order that mattered most. She lost Adaze first. Ada enrolled her in a new school. She took her to meet her real grandmother, who wept for an hour, then laughed and then wept again. Adaze adjusted with the resilience of children. Not easily, not without pain, but with a wholeness that Grace found both comforting and devastating, because it confirmed what she had always feared. The child would survive without her. She lost Kenneth slowly, then all at once. He came back for his things in 2 separate trips. He was never in kind, he was simply gone, present in body for the logistics of separation, absent everywhere that mattered. He told her once, quietly, that it was not the lie itself that had ended them. It was the knowledge that she had been capable of it, that the woman he thought he knew had been living a parallel life of deception so complete that he now questioned every true thing between them. She lost her church community when the story filtered through, as stories in Lagos always do, carried on whispers from someone who knew someone who had seen Kenneth moving his things out. She lost the version of herself she had most believed in, the loyal friend, the devoted mother, the woman of integrity. What remained was Grace alone in a house in Lagos that was too large and too quiet, sitting with the full weight of what she had chosen. 6 months later, Ada brought Adaze to see her. Grace had not asked. She had not contacted Ada after the separation was complete, not once, because she understood she had forfeited the right to make demands. But Ada came. She called the day before and she came. And she sat in Grace's sitting room, the same room where everything had collapsed. And she watched Adaize show Grace her new score report. Grace held that report with both hands and said nothing for a long time. Adaize said, "I came first in English." Grace said, "Of course you did. You are always going to come first in English." Adaize almost smiled. Ada watched them both. Then Ada said, "I am not here to punish you forever, Grace. I want you to know that. What you did was a serious thing, the most serious thing. But she grew up loved. I can see that. And she's going to need to understand what love looks like from people who have made mistakes and faced them." Grace looked at her. Ada said, "So I'm not closing this door completely, but it is my door now. And you do not knock on it. I open it when I decide it is right. And every time I open it, you remember what it costs to lose it." Grace nodded. She could not speak. Adaize was already pulling another book from her bag. Ada stood. She collected her daughter's school bag from the floor. She straightened her own blouse. And then Ada Okunko, who once cried on the floor of a university hostel corridor while her best friend sat beside her, walked to the front door of Grace's house and opened it herself. She did not look back. Grace sat in the silence of everything she had broken, in the ruins of the life she had built on someone else's loss, and she understood fully, finally, and without comfort, that some debts cannot be paid. They can only be carried every day for the rest of your life. Grace kept that child for 11 years out of love. But was it love or was it selfishness wearing love's face? Drop your answer below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. And drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.